Hello, welcome back to another pen talk. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for following on my journey. I've been going at a pretty fast speed the past couple days. I had some delays and challenges, new video editing program, which I'm still not happy with, but it's quicker to figure out what I can do with that one rather than trying to learn another one. And I do have a lifetime license, so therefore it makes it economically a good decision for me. So we have here four, I would call amber pens. The two at the bottom here are my two new ones. This one is that generic dual fold Centennial, or just Centennial, that I got from AliExpress. Here's the Moonman M600s, which I think really looks great in amber. Let's line these up again. And then we have a Moonman M800 and a Pen BBS 355. So right now, this view with these lights, this one definitely looks more orange, and it does look that way to me looking at it directly. These all have different amounts of swirls, different levels of transparency, which to me is typical of the resin that I first saw in Pen BBS, and then Moonman started using it. And considering the price of the Moonman 600 and the quality of its build, I consider that the best buy of these pens, even though the M800 is a pretty close price-wise. But I just kind of like the dual fold design. But this one has the same end cap, which is a faux end cap, just like they are on all of these, except the 355, because this is a draw filler. They all have a finial at the top, different shapes and designs to the finial, and these are black in the more dual fold classic designs. Let's explore a little bit further, but let's talk about shipping. The M600s arrived at my mailbox within exactly 1 week, 7 days from placing the Etsy order. Here's what that tracking looks like. And I'm blown away because, I have Pen BBS orders which are still sitting in China since April. And I know Bianni talked about some of them came back and she's shipping them DHL, but unfortunately my orders weren't one of those. I did ping her on Etsy Messenger. So I've ordered about 10 pens since then, and they've all arrived. Even my AliExpress order arrived. And the second one that I ordered from Bobby is in the States, and I should have hopefully within a week. Sometimes that last mile becomes a long mile, which many of us have experienced. So here we have the 4 pens posted, and a little bit of a spoiler alert. This generic Centennial pen does not post at all. Yes, it's placed there, but it just falls right off. The M600s is not a best poster, but it will post, and it does stay there a little bit. If you want one of these pens that posts, the M800 is the one to get. And the Pen BBS 355, the design does post, but not something I would do on a regular basis. Some people can deal with it, but like the M600s, it changes the balance significantly when you write, and to me, it changes it in a way which is not positive and not something I would do on a regular basis. I think we need to look more closely at the section and nibs. The other difference is, you'll notice that the Centennial has a number 5 nib in it, where the Moonman, these two Moonmen have a number 6 style nib. This is a nice two-tone Bach in here, but this version also comes with a Moonman nib, which I have in purple, which I've done a review. And of course, the Pen BBS 355 has that standard Pen BBS nib. This one happens to be Amber is a cat with two paw prints on it, but it's basically the same fine nib that you'll find on all of their pens. These sections, this one is the smallest by a large degree, which is what you would expect based on that number 5 nib, and also this is the thinnest barrel and cap as far as diameter goes. This section I like. It's a very classic design. This section is not a classic design, and it's not as bad as I thought it would be, but I certainly would prefer this style or this style, which even has more of an upturn at the end. I enjoy that upturn, so you get to feel from your hand exactly where you are on that section. And to me, with writing, where I change my position of my fingers and my grip a lot during my writing, I need a section that is able to do that with. I don't like the triangular shaped sections because they kind of force your fingers into one spot, which is not something I enjoy. This is the package the Moonman M600s Amber came in that arrived in 1 week. I just want to show it to you to show that it's just a standard China Post with a U.S. Post Office Service e-packet. You know, 2 labels, one that covers any import duties whatsoever, and one covers delivery. I can't explain why it came in 1 week, but I'm happy that it did. The M600s just came in as generic, you know, thin plastic protection, and then this velvet pen sleeve. The Centennial came in this nice metal box, and we'll give you the translation of the Chinese that's on the box. And when you open it up, you'll see a little bit higher end, kind of like a faux suede leather, which protects the pen and also gives you a place to store it if that's what you want. Here we have the M600s disassembled. And one of the things that I found very common with all the Moonman pens is they're easy to pull the nib, pull the feed, unscrew the nib collar from the section. Nice converter, very well made. The pen in general is extremely well made, very well engineered, and almost all of them are a very good form of eye candy. The converter and this nib collar work together very well. You know, they have that insert, could be like a silicone rubber insert to differentiate from this injection molded barrel, which the piston goes up and down in. And yes, it has a spring in it, which I will probably take out. But what's nice is that barrel fits very snugly and very securely at the end of the nipple, at the end of that nib section. So that's a great design. Have lots of longevity to it, and work very well. So speaking of the converter, this collar unscrews very easily from that barrel of the converter, lets everything come apart, and there we go. The spring is removed. I'll put some silicone grease on that piston, on these threads, and reassemble it, and I'll have a converter that, to me, will work better than one with the spring in it. We've gone into dark mode, and I bring in the LED light to play across this amazing amber resin. It's just an amazing amount of depth, pearlescence. It's just nice. Whoever designed this and thought it up has my sincere respect. It is translucent or semi-transparent, depending upon your vernacular. And if we look inside the cap, we'll see how they've machined a little bit of a seal there against the end of the section. At the top of that cap is a brass screw assembly, which holds in this black finial, which keeps that clip in place. So overall, I'm just extremely pleased. I have I think 6 or 7 of these M600s now, and all of them are great pens on every level. Visually, ergonomically, I like the Moonman fine nib. Some people may have called it a medium because it does write a very thick, fine line. Overall, just a nice pen. So if I had a viewer talk about only being able to half fill a converter. So this is my first fill of a pen inking for the first time. So I'm going to stick it back into the ink, go all the way down with the piston, and then bring it up slowly. And that's the second fill, which is probably about as full as you're going to get it. So it went from about maybe 50, a little bit over 50% full to probably about 75 or 80% full. And I took out the spring because one of the problems with the spring is when you bring the piston all the way down, that spring leaves a large gap between the piston and the feed and nib. So therefore, when you pull up ink, you get a lot more air the first time. Hopefully the second time you're pushing air out and a lot of ink lays in the section and feed. So when you bring it back up, you're bringing up that ink in addition to new ink. But filling a converter is just something you got to practice with, take time, and hopefully get a better fill. Here's the generic dual-fold Centennial in amber, which I need to compare it to the M600s in amber, which cost a few dollars less. You could basically say they're both the same price. One of the things that's obvious is that nib is a number 5. It does pull apart easily. There looks like there could be a nib assembly in there, but it doesn't unscrew. This is a lower end converter. As you can see, it's on the small side. I like the clear end of it because with the translucent resin, it don't show black through there. But it's just the same material here at the end. This section is brass. It's plated. You can see a little bit of that brass inside there where they machined the threads. The converter fits well. And again, I don't like those springs because it takes up room in the converter. So when you go to fill it up, instead of this piston going all the way down to the bottom, it stops. So when you pull up, you get all that air along with all the air in the feed. So that first fill is not very much. So we're going to try to take that out. I think the next thing to do is look at that feed, which is a generic injection molded feed, nothing special. It does have a flat bottom, which fits into a flat spot in the section. So let's bring in the LED. We have here just very little light. So as we bring in the LED, we'll play it across the surface. And this resin is very, very similar to the resin in the M600 and that Pen BBS uses, but it's not quite as transparent. It's more opaque. It's hard for that to see that under the LED, but you do see that black area, which is a little bit less. And I think the base resin is just a little bit more orange. There is pearlescence throughout it. This resin varies from inch to inch, so the barrel has a little bit more black in it. And that is a very thick wall there. So when they machined this, they really did a good job, and it made it narrow, so that's probably why that converter is like it is. And as you can see, when we play the light inside, there's more black in here than there was in the cap. And it has that same base orange with a little bit of pearlescence, but not a lot. And it does have some weight to it, so I think that end might have some metal and brass in it other than just that ring. So with this converter design, this metal collar just pulls off. It's just a friction fit there. Again, not made as well as the one on the Moonman, not even close. Yeah, the basic design of that converter is they're pretty much all the same once you get past that initial design. So we'll take that spring out because I don't think it does any good. As you can see, there's a lot less capacity in here than there was in the Moonman. We're going to put some silicone grease on everything, put it back together again, and we'll ink it up. The small converter got a pretty good fill. I mean, that's about as much ink in there as you can expect. There's only a little gap between the end of the piston and the ink. So this was one time down, one time up, one time down, one time up, constantly making certain that the ink level was above the nib and above the ridge here in that section. That channel in the back of the feed is pretty much where the ink comes up from. So you got to make certain it's always has a good exposure to the ink. So keeping the nib in further rather than shallower makes for a better fill. And unfortunately, if you have a low ink in your bottle, you may have some trouble getting a good fill. I decided I wanted this ink in the Centennial pen. It's number 135, and from those graphics, you might guess it's Beijing ink. Here's the color card. I've used this ink before. It's a very nice kind of orangish brown, and with the chromatography we can see that it does have some red in it, and it's kind of like this turquoise line at the very top. Interesting color combination there, a red to almost like a brown to a blue, and no water resistance, which is fairly typical of these Pen BBS inks. So I've inked up the pen and I've written with it for a while, and I'm going to be up front. Not a pen I recommend. Yeah, aesthetically it might be interesting, but I think the size and the weight is not a good proportion. It's a smaller pen that has a lot of weight to it. And the other challenge that it has, which makes no sense to me, is uncapping. There's one. There's two, there's three, there's four, over 4.5 turns to uncap, which to me makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. So that's why I refer to this as old school design, where they haven't taken into account a lot of the different aspects. You know, this enameled or coated, brass section, which is kind of on the small side, that number 5 nib. It is two-tone, but just a generic design on it, nothing special. So that's about it. Yes, again, I do like the color of the resin, but there's a lot of nice resins out there. And this is on the high side of any pens. This is closer to $30 US. And if we compare it to the M600, M800, no comparison. They are much better pens. They write better. They feel better in the hand, and they're better made. So I talked about the fact that this doesn't post. So no matter how hard you push down on that cap, it doesn't stay. And it sits very high, and it's just, again, bad design from my viewpoint. So I think you heard from that writing sample, this is a smooth nib, and it does have a little bit of feedback, but I enjoy feedback, so that doesn't bother me. It is smooth. It's kind of medium wet, not really dry or not really wet. The ink is a little bit on the dry side, so that's to be expected. And it writes fine this way, it writes fine that way. There's no real line variations. You put a little bit of pressure on it and it opens up a little bit. And then I actually railroaded. I haven't really pushed that nib before because it's not something I would do. So now we need to rate this pen, and I'm going to give it a 5. And I give it a 5 because it's a classic design, even though it's executed below my standards. It does have a nice nib. I mean, you can write with it. It does write. Without posting, it almost feels okay in the hand, but it is a little bit back-weighted, even with that cap not on the end of the barrel. And I think that's probably because this is a brass piece here, like Kaigaloo does, but the Kaigaloo just able to execute better and feel better in the hand. And also it's a little bit bigger, so that weight, to me, is easier to use when the pen is a little bit bigger. So this is about the lowest rating I've given a pen in a while. Yes, the nib does dry out quickly, which I think may have a little bit to do with the fact that the ink's a little bit dry. So enough of this, let's go on to the Moonman. So like the Centennial, it is that dual fold design, black finials at the end of the cap and barrel. Since this is that other more classic amber resin, you can see that converter when you get to the clear spots in the resin. So that's one thing, that the Centennial pen, that amber resin is much more opaque than this, but then doesn't have as much little depth and interest to that amber color that this pen does, and the Pen BBS pens do that are using this resin. So I decided to take a chance on this ink, which is number 154. I guess maybe that fruit is what it's named after. If we look at the color card, we'll see it's very much a yellowish orange in my eyes. It has some interesting characteristics, that it seems to dry a little bit darker than when it goes on wet, and we'll hopefully see that in the writing sample. And the chromatography is pretty monochromic. There's some yellow, some orange, so that's what we expect to see. But the ink is on the light side. I'd hope that the Moonman fine nib would put down enough ink to make it usable. Let's see. For those that may not have seen any of my M600s videos, the cap comes off in about 2 3/4 turns, which isn't a small amount. I had actually remembered, I thought it was less turns, but memory sometimes is faulty. So this pen fits great in the hand, feels great in the hand. That section to me is just about perfect, the way it's shaped, and that diameter. You can hold it anywhere, those threads don't bother you. And if you must post, you can push the cap on. It does fit, but it changes the balance. Not a whole lot, but just enough. And considering how good it feels not posted, that's why I would not post it when I wrote. I think you heard that this nib is as smooth as the Centennial nib. So it makes for a very pleasant writing experience, which I've enjoyed with all of these Moonman fine nibs. It's gold tone to go with the gold trim. And the ink actually works okay in this pen. It's not an ink I would use on a regular basis, but I can see it you know, the attraction. I kind of put this in the Patchy Sunset ink variety. It's not changing color as much as it did originally. It gets a little darker as it dries. So since I rated the other pen, we're going to rate this pen, and I'm going to give it a 9.6. A check for the design, construction, materials, and a check for the nib. It's a nib that you're not going to get any flex out of. I mean, if you push it, it opens up a little bit, but not something you're going to do on a regular basis. That's it. Hopefully you've enjoyed this long video where I explored a number of different things, and I was going to put a Fude nib in here just to show how this ink might change with a different nib, and ran out of energy. Maybe for another video. So thank you for watching. May you have many wonderful, great pen experiences. Enjoy your pens. Enjoy putting ink on paper. Hey, write some letters. Find some new pen pals. Write to some old pen pals. You know, that's what these pens are for. So we've reached the end of this video. Hopefully you're staying safe, healthy, and most importantly, happy. We're going to say bye for now. Until the next video. Yeah, the nib got off the paper.